South Carolina is another really interesting team because offensively, they may end up being one of the more explosive units in the SEC this year. They have an opportunity, especially because of what they have a quarterback in LaNorris Sellers. We're still phase on. We got to figure out what's going on with the NCAA eligibility with him. But Michael Smith, the tight end, I think is going to take another step forward. Everyone that I've spoken to out in Columbia really likes Jordan Dingle, the transfer from Kentucky. They like the offensive line. Boaz Stanley is going to be a player that they really think could just be an integral part of what is their interior offensive line. The wide receiver room, they didn't go out anybody in the portal, but they also like where they are at wide receiver. Do we like where they are? That's a question for another day. But they are going to have to be, I think, more offensively dependent. So, Dave, when you look at the Gamecocks coming off of a 9-4 finish, top 15 ranking, for a lot of people, an actual threat to be a dark horse to win the SEC, and certainly a threat to be this year's Tennessee, that fourth team that sneaks its way on in. Where are you and what needs to happen for South Carolina to make the college football playoff?
I mean, again, I think they're going to have some injury luck on the offensive line, just like a lot of teams. That's rare. And again, we talk about it all the time. Depth's not very good across the sport, especially at that position for all teams in college football. I would say that somebody stepping up at the wide receiver spot. I mean, I'm kind of looking at you, Nick Harbor. I mean, I like Mazeo Bennett, but I don't think Mazeo Bennett's a number. If he's a wide, I mean, I guess technically he could be someone's wide receiver one, but if he is your one, I don't think that's a sign of good things to come from an explosive standpoint. Again, it's nothing on him. I think his role's a 2 or 3. You feel pretty good about yourself then. And I think defensively they're going to drop off some, just depending with Clayton White and how much they drop off. Me and you were both high on Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. I think he could help them up front after losing some of those interior guys like TJ Sanders earlier. And then I think you see Shane Beamer talking about it in the offseason. They lost a lot of their leadership last year. Again, he talked about I wasn't high on South Carolina going into the year last year. Was low in the quarterback spot. Obviously, LaNorris Sellers was a lot better than I was expecting him to be. He mentioned a lot of people were saying their leadership is what they had last year and what he liked about that. And again, unless you're internally in that program, you wouldn't know that. And you could tell he kind of felt maybe it was the opposite this year. Like, we got the quarterback, so that's why we're being projected high by a lot of people. But he's like, not saying we don't have leadership, but that is a question mark going into the season that I felt really comfortable about with the guys like Nick and Manwari last year and stuff like that. And then also, bear my final one, I think, what do they do in the red zone, man, with Mike Shula? And they lost Rocket Sanders. And I know it's a bowl game. Feels like everybody's kind of putting a lot of stock in that bowl game because both South Carolina and Illinois are in everybody's preseason top 15. But they struggled in the red zone. What were they, 1 for 4? I think in red zone attempts in that bowl game, and he didn't play in that game. So that's a little bit of a concern for me because he was up to his 2022 self then. But no, there's a lot of reasons why that I don't think they would, but you can make a lot of different cases for sure. But Bear, why do you think they won't make the playoffs?
If they are going to make it, a wide receiver one steps up. Let's just start there. It doesn't matter if it's Nick Harbor or it's Mazeo Bennett. It could end up being a freshman. I mean, honestly, it could end up being Jalen Brown. It could be Devontae Mile. I mean, my bad, not Jalen Brown. My apologies. Donovan Murph. That was it. It could be Jaden Sellers. Could be Brian Rowe. Could be Lex Cyrus. Could be Malik Clark. They brought in 5 guys in this last recruiting class. Maybe one of them ends up having just such a good rapport out in fall camp. And here we are going into week 4, and now he has 25 catches for 295 yards, and 16's like, 0's open. All right, Lex Cyrus, go catch it for 6. It could be that. It may end up being Nick Harbor. Harbor spent the entire spring not working out in track and field. He said, I'm going to be a football player. So he's already built that relationship with Sellers during the regular season, done it when it comes to the offseason workouts. Could be Mazeo Bennett. I was a lot higher on Mazeo Bennett than I think most people last year. I thought there were certain times where, yeah, you wanted Nick Harbor to be that X-factor player, but the dude that was going to get you more consistency and move the chains was Mazeo. Like, that's how I felt about this team. So it doesn't matter which player ends up being that guy. But LaNorris Sellers has to feel confident that there is going to be a weapon open 95% of the time to where I can tuck and go. Boom. There we are. First down, move the chains. Let's hit reset. That's number 1. Number 2 is that a lot of these new defensive players, they don't act new. So the thing is that, yes, South Carolina went into the transfer portal. We already mentioned Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. That's a guy that I think that we're both high on because of the relationship and the style of defense that he plays. They also went and they brought in Justin Okoronkwo from Alabama. They brought in Sean Murphy from Florida State. They brought in Demon Clowney. But they also have DQ Smith, Judge Collier, Jalen Kilgore, Peyton Williams, David Busey, Jerome Williams, Nick Barrett, Monkel Godwin, and a couple of others that have been with Clayton White. So if you're talking about leadership, it just feels like an internal promotion. We're not going into free agency or the transfer portal to get better with these players. They're just going to serve with us as rotational options and solid contributors, but we're taking that leadership factor that we felt last year, and it's advancing to the next stage with the crop that we already have. They've been inside the building. They've been here through the workouts. They've been here through the dark times. They've been here through the blowout losses. They were here during the 5 a.m. Wake-up calls. They were here through the film study. They're acting like they're the leaders, and they already understand what Clayton White is looking for, and so they don't miss a beat. That's number 2. And number 3, do you have a run game? Because of whether or not you like it, the style of offense that Mike Shula is going to call is going to have to address the run. And I like Rasul Faison. And I think Rasul Faison, fully healthy, can be one of the better running backs in the SEC. Luttery did at Utah State last year, 6.6 yards on the ground, and I do think that he has a little bit more of that oomph. Like, he is not a guy that's going to go down quietly. He is going to force his way for that extra yard. And that may end up keeping a drive alive. But if the eligibility waiver doesn't work, how do you feel about Oscar Attaway? How do you feel about Jawan Howell? How do you feel about Jaquan Holman? How do you feel about your overall
running back 1, Oscar Attaway?
How do you feel about that situation? Because one of the things that really benefited for LaNorris Sellers last year was having a Rocket Sanders. And it's not even just, the rushing ability. Like the LSU game we can talk about all the time, both of them decided to go off and have multiple explosive runs. But how about just the Missouri game? A little shovel pass. 15 yards down the field, you're in the end zone. Time is about to expire. You don't win that game without having a trusted running back in the backfield because of how many times did you trust that Rocket Sanders was going to be your guy. So if you can have a run game, you can have a number 1 wide receiver, and that overall defensive mentality translates with players who were role players last year, and they end up being day 1 starters or significant contributors. South Carolina will have the schedule that will back them up and say, we went 10-2. We are in our spot in the college football playoff. Alabama, Oklahoma, you got to play LSU on the road. You get to go play against Ole Miss. I mean, Virginia Tech, even depending on what they do in the ACC, may end up being bountiful. There's a reason to say, yes, South Carolina, if all things go according to plan, can get to that double-digit marker.
Yeah, no. I mean, if all things hit and those things hit, similar to Tennessee, but they have the quarterback there.
What's the reason they won't make the playoff?
Reason why I already gave you mine. My why they wouldn't. I gave you mine. You asked me that on the front end. Why they wouldn't. My why they would.
Well,
I mean,
okay, well, why wouldn't?
Important position in all sports. You got the quarterback spot. If he can take that next step and play within the pocket at times. Again, we talk about Mazeo Bennett. I think a lot of Mazeo Bennett's catches can be attributed to LaNorris Sellers escaping the pocket and him getting hit wide open for some improvisation plays. So again, I think. LaNorris Sellers would be obviously the biggest reason why. Again, I think the schedule, to your point, anybody goes 10-2 in the SEC, I think you're getting in. But I'm not going to make any more than what it is. I think you got one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I think he has a chance to go take that next step. Mike Shula is a good quarterback developer. Is he a good play caller? It's to be determined. But I grew up around, not in Tuscaloosa, but going to a lot of Alabama games growing up as a kid with my family. And he was the head coach there for people who don't know, 03 to 06. Not always a great play caller, but John Parker Wilson's best year as a quarterback was under Mike Shula, and he played 2 years for Nick Saban after that. So let that for be what it is. It's going to come for the LaNorris Sellers is the reason why I think they make the college football playoff because I think it's the most important position in all sports.
I mean, naturally, that would be the right answer. But for me, the reason they wouldn't make the college football playoff, they just lost too much. I mean, especially defensively. Yes, you will have Dylan Stewart back, and yes, you will have Jalen Kilgore back. And I'm going to be real, Dave. I think both of them are probably top 5 at their position, one in the nickel and one at defensive end. They're just so well adapted, and they fit what Clayton White wants. But it's the undertone names that we're talking about that aren't brought up enough, like a Tonka Hemingway. How do you replace a big-time 350-pound nose tackle that can move that fast? How do you replace what Demetrius Knight did for your second level of your defense? How do you replace what Adebo Williams could offer for you? How do you replace a Nicky Manori on the back end that was not only a physically imposing, heat-seeking missile type hitter, but he also could create the turnovers? How do you replace what you lose at the cornerback position? Because you brought in a lot of transfers, but there's also that factor of, you relied so heavily on the portal. You also are relying so heavily that these players are connecting to your culture by the time that the most important part of your season rolls around. And if they're not there, you're going to drop a game whether you like it or not because of it's just not the right timing. And that's where I have an issue with, because I still think the offense is going to be fine. Sellers, I think, will improve as a passer. I do think that they have wide receivers that are good. Maybe they're not great, but they're good. I do think that Rasul Faison can do a lot if you actually get him on your roster for this year. But one of the things that we talked about,
I'd be shocked if they didn't. They wouldn't have brought him on if they didn't think.
But one of the things that we talk about is last season, the reason why it was so easy to trust in South Carolina to be in every game was their defense would give their offense one more shot. Hey, we need a third down stop. All right, cool. TJ Sanders is getting a sack for a loss of 5. Ball's back in your court. Can you go and make up for that? Can you make up for the turnover that you had earlier? I don't know if South Carolina's defense has that right now. I feel really good about the pieces that are there. I feel good about some leaders that you're expecting to kind of take on that role that you're losing with Eman Wari and Knighton and what you lost in Kyle Kennard.
And I don't even think you need somebody. Obviously, they're not going to replace Kyle Kennard with another SEC Defensive Player of the Year.
No, but if you did,
even if he can be decent, I think people forget Dylan Stewart got a lot of one-on-ones, where this year that ain't going to be the case until someone on the other side proves that. I think a lot of people aren't really discussing that just because, again, you get a lot of one-on-ones. You don't have a tight end or running back over there to help you chip.
Yeah. But again, I think the defense was a big reason why every single game, regardless of what the score was, you felt confident. Because, again, that Oklahoma matchup, Sellers didn't set the tone in that game. The defense did. They picked off Michael Hawkins and they put them up 28-0. I was like, it was 28-0 after the first quarter, and like the offense barely took the field. So it's like you just knew that your defense was going to bail you out of trouble if you didn't have the best day at the bank offensively. You don't have that right now. And you are going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and you are going to Oxford, Mississippi, and you are going to Como, Missouri, and you are having to play against Texas A&M at Kyle Field. Your schedule, it may end up being relinquishing in your favor in terms of, hey, we'll prove that we are one of the best teams because of the gauntlet that we have to go through. But you also have to go to these locations, hostile locations, and some of these games are going to be at 7 o'clock at night where your defense may end up being the reason why you walk away with the dub. And I'm not saying that I'm not high on South Carolina. I have them as my number 10 team going into this year. But there is a lot of reasons to believe that right now you won't replace what you brought in terms of leadership. You won't replace the type of player that had been indoctrinated into this culture and had been building up to this moment, whether it be from the transfer portal or whether it be just in terms of overall production to where you're right back to square one. That's where I'm at.